Silent battlefields, where historic photos whisper the untold stories of war and human memory.
Du, meine Arbeit für richtig hältst, ob du glaubst, dass ich fleißig gewesen bin, dass ich gearbeitet habe, dass ich mich in diesen Jahren für dich eingesetzt habe.
In the stifling humidity of the Pacific, the 8 fierce guns in the B-25's nose needed to be tended like the blades of a lifesaver. Every night, under the flickering light of oil lamps, mechanics painstakingly cleaned the ammunition feeds and adjusted each swivel, knowing that one jammed gun or mechanical failure during a low-altitude dive would mean certain death for the entire crew. The propellers whirred in the tropical night. The battle-worn iron frame tightened and polished for the fiery dawn. Behind the wings, a silent intelligence network plotted the path of death. Coastal reconnaissance teams, ambush submarines, decoded coded messages, all combined to form a divine eye, guiding the B-25 to the right place at the right time, where the enemy was most vulnerable. Information often arrived only hours before takeoff, turning each mission into a surprise punch to the heart of Japanese transport. And then, every ship within 500 miles of the American airfield lived in fear. This morning, it might be the last dawn, but every victory was bloody. Flying low, facing anti-aircraft fire head-on, American pilots had to keep a straight course as bursts of explosive shells tore through the air. Only at the last second did they pull the trigger, narrowly escaping the water and the gunfire. Not everyone made it. The 3rd Strike Group alone left more than 40 B-25s in the burning sky, most of them falling in near-sea dives. With each takeoff, the crews knew they were playing a life-or-death game, where even a slower heartbeat could mean their lives. Amid the roar of engines and the smell of burning fuel, veteran pilots were worn to the limit. Anxiety gripped them like an invisible demon, forcing many to abandon combat missions. They had seen too much. Bullet trails streaked through the cockpit, comrades burned in mid-air, and the responsibility of returning to those skies again became too heavy. Behind the victory at sea, the mental cost was enormous. The success of the B-25 Strafer was more than an isolated victory. It changed American military doctrine. The innovations born from the grease pits of forward airfields, painstakingly tested by individuals like Pappy Gunn, proved that sometimes combat innovation outpaced conventional weapons. The courage of commanders like General Kenny to advocate unconventional solutions, breaking the textbook to win battles, paved the way for a new kind of war, fast, flexible, and ruthless. With each B-25 dive, with each salvo of gunfire, enemy life was reduced to mechanical calculation: shoot, wipe, retreat. Japanese survivors described the feeling with one chilling word: like being attacked by a flying machine gun nest. It was not the skill of a single pilot, but the combined force. Speed, range, and firepower combined into a destructive machine, turning killing into an industrial process. And as the war entered its final months, Strafer continued to evolve. The program was more than just nose guns. It ushered in an era in which bold experimentation, heavy aircraft armament, and the development of suicide attacks, coastal defenses, and industrial targets became part of preparations for continental invasion. In the flash of artillery and fire, the world learned a quiet but powerful lesson. In modern warfare, a simple idea executed in time can change the strategic map. The 8 guns on the noses of the B-25s didn't just decimate the fleet. They turned every ground target to scrap metal. Train heads were torn off, radar stations were reduced to rubble, and anti-aircraft batteries were shut down by the steady rain of bullets in massive raids. The plan was laid: flatten Japanese ports and anchorages, wipe out the remains of the Imperial Navy before the invasion force could even set foot ashore. Though the facts of history changed with the end of the war, Strafer's legacy remains etched in the face of modern military aviation. The simple but devastating idea to pack an aircraft with massive forward firepower spawned a family of flying weapons. From the B-25 to the AC-47, the AC-130, and even the A-10 Thunderbolt II with its massive 30mm cannon, all of which formed a lineage of overwhelming firepower at close range. The A-10s rained down their shells like heirs to a legacy from the Australian repair shop where Pappy Gunn first loaded Mitchell's nose with a gun. Decades later, Strafer veterans still gather to tell stories of the seemingly suicidal missions that disrupted enemy strategy. They remember the thick smell of gunpowder as 8 muzzles exploded simultaneously, the vibrations that rippled through the fuselage, and the images of enemy ships disintegrating under hail of bullets in their eyepieces. They know they once piloted something unusual, a weapon born of combat, not from a textbook. Post-war, Japanese analysts coldly observed the B-25 Strafer was one of 3 factors that strangled the Imperial dream. Along with radar and codes, with ships no longer protected from air attack, supply lines were broken, island strongholds were starved of food and ammunition, and all plans for counterattacks were reduced to ashes. It was a lesson of modern warfare, sometimes a crude but timely idea. A bowgun, a factory innovation in the middle of a battlefield, can change the strategic situation. And in the flash of its guns, the Strafer turned seas and harbors into cinematic scenes, painful, devastating, and decisive. Admiral Somu Toyota, the last commander of the combined fleet, coldly declared, "The 8-barreled B-25 destroyed our ability to move at sea." It was a verdict on an island nation. Loss of freedom of the seas is loss of strategic life. On the war history screen, the B-25 Strafer's parameters appear as myth. Picture 8 64-pound machine guns clattering into the nose of a plane not meant for such a task, each gun firing 850 rounds a minute, the whole assembly exceeding 500 pounds without ammunition. Each barrel holds 400 rounds, for a total of 3,200 rounds, enough for about 30 seconds of continuous fire, though pilots typically only pull the trigger in 6 to 8 second bursts of lightning fury. But the Strafer was more than numbers and weight. It embodied the spirit of American warfare, fast, brutal, and innovative. In field workshops, men stripped out the bomb bay, reinforced the frame, engineered complex ammunition feeds, and turned the average bomber into a shooting machine, testing, tweaking, and then sending it straight into the field to be tested in blood and steel. While other nations might have spent 5 years designing a specialized model, Americans turned reality into a weapon in weeks and let the battlefield decide. The risk-taking courage of commanders like Kenny, the trust in the judgment of the men in the air, and the greasy hands of mechanics created a game-changing weapon. Not an invention on paper, but a combat innovation. Fast, ruthless, and effective. In the flash of gunfire and the whine of engines, the B-25 Strafer etched a chilling lesson into history. Sometimes, a crude and timely idea can turn the fate of an empire around. As the smoke of World War II slowly cleared, the B-25 Strafer crews emerged from the fire as proud survivors, their chests covered in medals, from the Distinguished Flying Cross to the Silver Star to special presidential commendations. But no amount of metal could describe what they had done. Hellish missions, risking their lives to isolate and suffocate the entire Japanese force in the Pacific. The image of 8 flaming shells tearing through the air, slashing straight through the decks of Japanese ships, turning the tide in 15 minutes over the Bismarck Sea. It was a moment etched in film. And then, on that fateful day of August 14th, 1945, When Japan announced its surrender, the B-25 strafers delivered their final blow. The planes of the 345th Bomb Group dove into the inland sea, crushing Japanese ships desperate to escape to Korea. When the crew returned to base, they learned the war was over. Their 8-barreled beast was no longer needed. But what it left behind was far more than a war. A concept, a testament to how creativity could transform a mere creature into a terror machine. The B-25 Strafer was more than an improvement. It was an icon, proof that sometimes, in the midst of battle, men could create a legend that would change the history of military aviation. From Pappy Gun's crazy experiments at Eagle Farm to the monstrous B-25J-22 with its 18 guns lined up to fire, the Strafer program proved a cruel truth. In war, the fastest to adapt survive. The 850 caliber guns that protruded from the nose of the B-25 were more than just steel and gunpowder. They were symbols of daring, ingenuity, and the will to win. The Bismarck Sea became the stage for a tactical revolution, where every assumption about aerial warfare was torn apart in a matter of minutes. The Imperial Japanese Navy, the descendants of the samurai spirit that made Tsushima legendary, was utterly helpless against the mechanics from Texas and the pilots from Kansas. Ordinary people who turned their bombers into flying death buses. And on the morning of March 3, 1943, when Admiral Kimura saw the B-25 strafers streak toward him like the blades of fate, he saw more than a new weapon. He saw a new kind of war, one where tradition was crushed by innovation, and where a few innovative planes would shatter a naval empire that once ruled the seas. The film ended tragically, but its aftershocks would reverberate through human history.